My neighbor Karen, the HOA's self-crowned queen, shoving her dead Tesla down the street, her face a sweaty mask of fury. She'd been siphoning my EV charger for weeks, until I rigged it to suck her battery dry instead. This isn't just about electricity, it's a petty war of wits, and I had a trap so clever it turned her pride into my juice. Stick around to see how I flipped the switch and won. You ever have that one neighbor who thinks the world is her personal vending machine, and you are the coin slot mines named Karen? Of course, now to clarify, her name's not literally Karen, but when someone stomps around like the unofficial queen of the cul-de-sac believes. HA rules were written by Moses himself and acts like your property is just an extension of her kingdom. Yeah, Karen. Anyway, let me set the scene. I live in a modest two-story duplex at the edge of our little neighborhood, nothing fancy. Just me, my tools garage full of half-finished projects, and recently one shiny sweet level 2 EV charger I installed right next to my front steps. It was wired directly into my own system, metered clean, and tucked behind a little waist-high hedge. I put it there. For my car, a plug-in hybrid I picked up secondhand that I lovingly call Sparky Functional Efficient, and mine, enter Karen. Now Karen drives a Tesla Model Y, because of course she does. Pearl white license plate says, "Ely, you can't make this." Stuff up every time she plugged in, my power bill spiked $38. That's groceries. That's dog food. That's my money disappearing into her glossy white Tesla. At first I noticed her car parked a little too close to my hedge, then I saw the charger cable mysteriously looped around the hedge's corner. Then one morning, sipping coffee on my porch, I watched in horror as her car hissed to life while jacked into my station without so much as a knock on the door. I stared at the scene like it was Bigfoot riding a unicycle through my yard. I mean, she didn't even try to be subtle. It was the kind of audacity that deserves its own genre. So I confronted her. "Hey, Karen, did you mean to plug into my charger? It's not public, you know." She blinked at me like I'd asked her to donate a kidney. "Oh, honey," she said, waving her acrylic nails at me like I was a confused intern. "We neighbors sharing is part of the community spirit, right?" She'd shout, "Community spirit," like it was a get-out-of-jail-free card. Turns out, community spirit doesn't cover felony-level entitlement. And I suppose if I didn't lock my front door, she'd be entitled to borrow my couch too. I tried to stay polite. I really did explain the charger was privately installed on my meter and not for communal use. She smiled in that tight-lipped, condescending way that said, "I'll pretend to listen until I'm out of sight." Then she unplugged her car with a "well, maybe you should have put up a sign," and strutted off like she just taught me a valuable life lesson. Spoiler alert, she plugged in again 2 nights later, and the night after that she waited till I was out or asleep. I even caught her on my motion camera once, sneaking over like some kind of midnight raccoon, only instead of stealing cat food, she was siphoning kilowatts. I left a polite note taped to the charger. She left a passive-aggressive note on my door the next morning saying she was disappointed in my lack of generosity and neighborly cooperation. There was a smiley face at the end. Classic emotional terrorism. The HOA, of course, did nothing. "It's a personal dispute," they said. "Resolve it among yourselves," which is HOA speak for "we're too busy measuring mailbox height to deal with your nonsense." So I stopped asking, I stopped warning, and started planning, because what Karen didn't know, what Karen didn't realize, my charger wasn't just off limits. It was rigged to bite back. By the time she saw her battery percentage dropping, it was too late. Is that I have a friend, Derek, who doesn't just dabble in electronics, he breeds circuit boards. The man once built a Wi-Fi controlled flamethrower for a Halloween prop. You think I was going to sit around letting Tesla Barbie siphon my juice while I had Derek on speed dial? No, I called him over that weekend, showed him the setup, and laid out my very specific request. I want a switch, said something simple, 2 positions, one that charges, one that drains. Derek's eyes lit up like I just asked him to build a laser for a moon base. Drains, he repeated. "Yep, like reverse charging. I want her car to feed me now." Technically, Teslas don't support bidirectional charging natively, but Derek's not about technicalities, he's about loopholes, adapters, and being just enough of a mad scientist to get things done. What we ended up building was a Frankenstein setup, hidden switch in my garage that flipped the circuit. In one mode, my car got power. In the other, any car plugged in would think it was charging, but it was actually trickle draining into a hidden battery bank we rigged behind a shelf in my garage. Gauge, it wouldn't kill a battery overnight, that'd be too obvious, but over a few hours it nibble away nice and slow like a vampire with a napkin tucked in. We even added a fake LED indicator to show charging status no matter what. Derek called it psychological seasoning. Then I printed the sign private charger do not use without permission. Unauthorized vehicles may experience unexpected results. And I made sure the font was just big enough to be passive aggressively noticeable. I even laminated it because if you're going to set a trap, you should at least make it weatherproof. Then we waited. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, Karen struck again. It was around 10:45 p.m. when I got the ping from my motion cam. Her Tesla rolled up like a cat burglar in yoga pants. She glanced around, saw the sign, and smirked, of course. She did. Signs are just challenges to people like Karen waving a steak in front of Bear and saying, "Don't eat this, please." She plugged in, settled into her car, started scrolling her phone while charging light blinked merrily. I flipped the switch from inside my garage, and just like that, her battery became mine by the time Karen pulled away from my driveway. The next morning, I'd already flipped the switch back to normal, no trace clues, just a Tesla that had charged for 8 hours and left with slightly less juice than it came in with. Now, if Karen noticed anything, she didn't let on, but I did catch her walking back to house with a weird look on her face. That squint in my car said it was charging, but my range went down. Face subtle, confused, mildly constipated, beautiful. And then 2 days later, she came back. See, people like Karen are like pigeons. If you give them breadcrumbs, once they'll show up for the buffet. The laminated warning sign. She clearly thought that was bluff, or maybe she assumed I was bluffing, and she had some HOA immunity cloak on. She plugged in again, same spot, smug expression. I didn't even wait. This time, as soon I heard the cable click in from garage camera feed, I flipped the switch, drain mode, engaged, and this time we went full upgrade because Derek, bless his brilliant little gremlin heart, had come back the day before with a new patch for our little system. See, originally, we were just trickle draining her car into the batteries I had stacked in my garage. Now, we added a little bonus, an energy meter. Every time Karen's Tesla donated power, the system logged it. I could see down to the decimal how much electricity she was involuntarily investing into my home backup kit. That night, 3.4 quad hours, not much, but considering the average electricity cost in our area, she had just unknowingly refunded me about $1 and some change. Hey, not bad for a single night of justice. The next morning, she marched up my steps. I was already sipping coffee on my porch, pretending to read the news on my tablet while watching her reflection in the window. "Excuse me," she barked. I lowered my tablet like I was shocked to see her there. "Morning, Karen, lovely weather." She crossed her arms and pointed at the charger. "Is there something wrong with your outlet?" I blinked, playing dumb like a champ. "Nope, works great." What? She frowned. "My car said it was charging, but the range didn't go up. In fact, it dropped." I shrugged like she just told me her gluten-free bread tasted like cardboard. Maybe it's your cable or battery. Teslas can be weird sometimes. She didn't like that answer, not because it wasn't reasonable, but because it didn't give her anything to argue with. Karen needs conflict the way normal people need water. Well, she sniffed. "Just so you know, sharing is a two-way street. It would be nice if you were a little more cooperative with your neighbors, right?" I said, nodding. "And it would be nice if people asked before plugging into something they don't own." She didn't like that either. She huffed, muttered something about community spirit, and stomped back to her driveway like a toddler denied an extra cookie. That night, she plugged in again. At this point, I started wondering if she was doing it on purpose now, like it was a game of stubbornness chicken, and she was convinced I'd either cave or eventually forget Karen. "Sweetie, I built the charger I live for." Petty persistence. Flip drain mode on another 8 quad hours straight into my garage battery. System logged the energy with a happy little beep that was starting to sound like applause, but then things got theatrical. 3 days later, around 9 a.m. I heard shouting from outside. I opened the door to find Karen pacing in front of my driveway like she was waiting for her cue in a community theater production of Entitled the Musical. "You." She shouted, pointing a perfectly manicured nail at me. "Me just waking up, hair sticking like a fried squirrel." "Yes, you stole my electricity." She was holding her phone out like it was a smoking gun. "I took my car to the Tesla service center. They said someone's been discharging the battery through the charger port." I raised an eyebrow. "That's wild. I didn't even know that was possible." "Oh, don't play dumb. I know it was you." Glanced at the sign still taped to the charger. Same one she'd ignored 3 times. "Well, the sign does say unexpected results." "You think that's funny?" I tilted my head, pretending to think about it a little. "Yeah." She huffed again. That huff does when she realizes the moral high ground she thought she was standing on is actually a sinkhole. "You're going to pay for the damage." "I'm calling police." Oh, there it was, the Karen final move. When all else fails, summon the authorities like a boss fight. "Sure," I said, stepping back. "Want me to wait here with you? I'll grab the footage from my Security cam, just in case they want to see who plugged into what. That stalled. Her eyes flicked toward the hedge where charger lay, then to my garage, back to me. And that's when it hit her. She realized she'd plugged into my private charger on my property multiple times after I warned her and posted signs. I had it all on video. She turned a delightful shade of pinkish rage, not quite red, not quite embarrassed, more like a beat that got caught committing tax fraud. This isn't over, she muttered, spinning on her heel and storming off. I called after her. You forgot to unplug. Want me to mail your cable back? No answer, just the hum of humiliation following her down the street. That evening, I tallied up the numbers. Over the past 2 weeks, Karen had donated roughly 11 quad hours of energy, roughly $442 small price to pay for justice, really. But I wasn't done, not yet, because I had one final surprise for her, something special, something illuminating. If Karen was rattled, she didn't show it. Well, not in the traditional sense. See, normal people would react to getting caught stealing power by, stopping, maybe baking an apology pie, maybe just moving on with their lives. Not Karen. No, doubled down. Next morning, she did something so bold, I actually laughed out loud when saw it. She wheeled her garbage bin right up next to my charging station like a shield. Then that night, she parked next to it, plugged in again, and used the bin to hide the cable. That's right, she was now running stealth off. I'm convinced in her head this was some elite level Mission Impossible infiltration. In reality, it looked like she was trying to feed electricity a trash can. But hey, I admired the commitment. The moment I saw her plug in, I hit the switch drain mode on. At this point, it was muscle memory, like flipping on a porch light, and I figured since she was already neck deep in denial, why not make it really obvious? So I printed a second sign. This one went directly on the charger. It read, "Caution, experimental energy recovery system in testing. Unauthorized use will result in power loss." And just to add that final Karen bait touch-up, smiley face. The next day, Karen came pounding on my door like she was auditioning for the role of Rage in the live action. "Inside out, your stupid charger just drained my battery again," she shouted. I blinked at her toothbrush still in hand. You used it again. Even after the warning signs, that's not legally binding. She snapped. "It doesn't mean you can steal from me, okay?" Deep breath, Leighton, take a quick time out here. She used my charger on property, ignoring multiple warning signs, and now I was stealing her power. Weed officially entered the upside down. "I'm not stealing," I said, leaning against the door frame. "I'm reclaiming slightly used electrons." "You've messed up my car." "Technically," I said, "you messed it up yourself. All I did was let the system do what it's designed to do." "I'm calling the police for real this time. Go it." And she did. About 15 minutes later, I heard the familiar whoop of a cruiser rolling up the block. Now here's the thing, I'm a pretty chill guy, but also the kind of guy who keeps receipts, digital, physical, emotional. If you cross me, I will remember your shoe size. By the time Officer Daniel, who already knew me from neighborhood meetings, great guy likes fishing, stepped out of the cruiser, I had everything prepped: camera footage of Karen plugging in on multiple nights, copies of the laminated signs, a short written breakdown of my electrical setup, a thermos of hot coffee, because hey, hospitality matters. Karen, bless her oblivious heart, came barreling out of her house like a banshee in yoga pants, waving her phone and ranting about electrical sabotage and econ terrors. And Daniels took one look at her, then turned to me. "Want to walk through what's going on?" So I did, calmly with evidence, while Karen stood behind him, whisper screaming, "He's lying," and muttering about a class action lawsuit. When I got to the part about the switch, Daniels raised an eyebrow. "You installed a system that drains power from anything plugged in without permission, correct? Only when manually activated, and there are multi-M warnings posted." He looked at the charger. He looked at the signs. "Karen, did you plug into this?" Without asking, she paused. For the briefest, most glorious moment, I saw at the flicker of doubt, the realization that she was in fact about to incriminate herself in front of a cop. "I thought it was public," she said. "Daniels nodded slowly. "On private property with warning signs and video footage showing you doing it repeatedly." Karen sputtered. Daniels turned to me. "You want press charges?" Oh, I wanted to believe me, but this wasn't about court. This was humiliation, and she'd already handed me the match and the gasoline, and I said, "Think the lesson's being learned." Karen glared at me like she was trying to melt my face with sheer willpower. Then she stomped off without another word, her footsteps cracking like thunder down the driveway. Daniels just chuckled. "You ever think of running for HOA president?" "President God, no," I said, like having a soul. He laughed, took the coffee, and left, and Karen had a dead Tesla because that night she tried to use my charger again. Even after the cop, I swear I'm not making this up, she must have been completely desperate. I watched on my camera as she crept up in the middle of the night, hoodie up, cable in hand, like she was robbing Fort Knox. Instead of trying to snag a few kilowatts, she plugged in, stared at the LA light for a moment, Then marched back to her car and dozed off in the driver's seat. I flipped the switch drain mode on this time. I left it running all night. When the sun came up, I opened my garage and peeked out. Karen's car was dead, not low, limping dead. She tried to start it, nothing, popped the door open, looked around, kicked the front while she yanked the charger cord out, and just stood there, defeated, hands on hips, like she was waiting for the ground to open up and swallow her. It didn't, but what happened next? Chef's kiss. Karen stood in front of her completely dead Tesla like a Shakespearean villain at the end of Act 3, outraged, confused, and somehow still convinced she was the victim. I in my garage sipping coffee like I was watching an episode of Survivor Suburban Edition, and let me tell you, watching her try to maintain dignity while simultaneously kicking her bumper was top-tier. ENT meant eventually she stomped back to her house and returned with her phone pressed against ear, already mid-rant. I couldn't hear exactly what she was saying, but based on the hand gestures and increasing volume, I'm pretty sure the conversation went something like, "No, I didn't drain it. He did with his I don't know vampire charger," or something. Just send the damn tow truck. About 45 minutes later, a flatbed truck pulled up. Now the driver looked like he'd seen some things, probably been in this game too long to be fazed by a furious woman in Athol as your pants screaming about energy crimes. He tried to get her Tesla into neutral to winch it up. But yeah, fully dead battery, no juice means shift, so she did what any rational adult would do. She started pushing at herself, that's right. Queen Karen of Kilowatt County was now physically shoving her once pristine Tesla down the sidewalk 1 inch at a time with the world's most dramatic scowl on her face. It was beautiful. A few neighbors peeked out from behind curtains. One guy, Bob, 2 doors down, came out just to water his already soaked lawn purely for the view. His smirk said it all. This is better than HBO. Meanwhile, I leaned casually against my fence, arms crossed, watching her struggle like a Greek tragedy playing out in yoga pants and Crocs. When she finally got it to her driveway, she collapsed onto her porch steps, wheezing. Now most people would have learned something at this point. Something about boundaries, consequences, about not messing with an engineer who has a petty streak and access to industrial batteries. But Karen went full tilt, because the next day, I kid you not, got a certified letter shoved into my mailbox from Karen. Handwritten in cursive, it was one of the most unhinged documents I've ever read. A few highlights claimed I had hacked her vehicle and violated Tesla's energy sovereignty, accused me of operating an illegal power redistribution facility, demanded $372 in damages, a number she seemed to pull directly out of her soul, threatened to sue me in small claims court if I didn't comply within 72 hours. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my launch, but just to cover my basis, I forwarded the letter to my buddy Sarah. She's a real estate lawyer and loves this kind of nonsense. Her response: tell to see, please, I need the entertainment. Considered ignoring it completely, but then I thought and lean and so wrote back, typed double-spaced. Signed in blue ink, just to be fancy. Dear Karen, thank you for your recent correspondence. While I appreciate your creativity, must politely decline your request for payment. As stated by multiple warning signs, your ad of the charger was unauthorized. The system you accessed was clearly marked as private and experimental, and your repeated interaction with it constitutes implied consent. Furthermore, I have video footage of each incident, as well the presence of Officer Daniels during your most recent visit. Should you choose to pursue legal action, I would be happy to provide a full dossier of evidence to the court, including footage, technical breakdowns, and neighborhood witness statements. Warm regards, the guy who owns charger you keep stealing from. I mailed it back in the same envelope she sent me 2 days later. She tried again like a moth to a flame, only this time that was wearing petty gloves and had a backup generator in the garage. But this time I upgraded the truck because, well, Karen had been plotting her legal fantasy land. I had been talking to Derek again, and Derek, being the evil genius he is, had an idea. Leighton add visual feedback. He said, make the charger look like it's doing something dramatic when drain mode's on, so we did wired up a few extra LEDs, pulsing meter, and a little speaker that made a descending tone when activated like a cartoon battery. Think of it as theater for the technologically clueless. So that night when Karen rolled up, like she hadn't just spent the last week publicly tanking her own credibility, I waited. She plugged in the charger, beeped, the lights glowed red, descending tone played out like the end of a video game life bar, and I watched her face fall into full O mode. She stared at the charger, back her car, back at the charger, and then she lost it. I heard it through the security mic, just pure high octane screeching something about this is illegal and you're reverse engineering my property, and the best one, you're sucking my Tesla dry, I nearly choked on my tea, then came the sound of her calling someone again and demanding real police this time. By the time two uniformed officers actually showed up, not Daniels this time, two new guys, Karen was in full meltdown, red, the face hair frizzing, waving her phone like it was casting spells. They asked what was going on. I explained calmly, casually invited them to the garage show setup. They nodded, listened, checked the footage. One of them laughed. This is the weirdest energy theft case I've ever heard, Karen shouted from the sidewalk. He's draining my car to power his weird batteries, Karen. He's reverse engineering my Tesla. Cup, ma'am, the only crime here is your commitment to bad decisions. Ma'am, the officer replied, you plugged into his charger on property again after multiple warnings, but it says charging. Yeah, I chimed in, just not your battery. That was the moment right there, the exact second Karen realized she had just publicly confessed again to using something I told her not to, and now there were two more cops to witness it. She went silent, not the calm kind of silent, the kind where the soul temporarily exits the body, to have a little chat with the universe about bad decisions. The officers gave her a warning and suggested she avoid further interaction with the charger. One of them asked if she needed a ride back to her house a mere 60 feet away. She declined. Walk back slowly, no stopping this time, just pure battery depleted shame, and I flipped the switch off, charged my car, and started planning a little something for the grand finale, because while Karen was finally learning not to steal power, she was about learn what it felt like to be powerless. You'd think after being drained, caught on camera, publicly called out by the police twice, and having to push her car home like a sad eco-parade float, Karen would have waved the white flag. But no, this woman didn't just double down. She mortgaged her entire ego and tripled down. I think at this point it was less about the electricity and more about the principle. And by principle, I mean her inability to admit she was ever wrong, so she tried one more tactic, and boy, this one was a doozy. She went full-blown HOA. She filed a complaint to the HOA board about me. Yep, according to the letter, she tried hand deliver. I refused to answer the door because boundaries. I was in violation of calm communal harmony, operating an unlicensed energy system and creating a hostile environment for electric vehicle owners. Now, normally, I'd have tossed that kind of nonsense straight into the trash, but this was an opportunity because Karen had just triggered a mandatory HO review meeting, which meant she'd have to present her complaint in person. Front of the board with me there to respond. I couldn't RSVP fast enough. I wore a button-up, brought printed packets, included labeled screenshots, diagrams of the charger setup, a log of kilowatt hours reclaimed, and a spreadsheet titled Unauthorized Charging Sessions by one entitled neighbor. Karen, meanwhile, showed up with a highlighter streak copy of the HOA handbook and the kind of energy usually reserved for reality show confessionals. The board listened patiently as she spun her story, painting herself as a victim of electrical warfare. I was trying to promote sustainability, she said, and he weaponized a charger. Then it was my turn. I handed out my packet, clicked through a short slideshow I'd put together. Yeah, I made a slideshow, and calmly laid out the entire sequence of events, dates, video captures, quotes from both police visits, the works. At the end, I played security cam audio clip of her screaming, "You're sucking my Tesla dry." The room went dead silent. Then someone snorted. Bob. Watering his lawn. Bob, turns out he's on the board. He tried to cover it up with a cough, but the damage was done. Board thanked us both, said they deliberate privately, and called the meeting to a close. I walked out feeling like I just presented a science fair project called How to Turn an Entitled Neighbor into a Battery Donor. 3 days later, I got the result. The board didn't just side with me. They fined her $200 for disruptive innovation. The look on her face? Priceless. So now you're probably thinking, okay, surely this is the end. But no, there's one more cherry on this already frosted cake, because Derek, the genius behind all circuitry, had been watching this whole thing play out like it was an HBO miniseries, and as a parting gift, he brought over a little something he'd 3D printed and wired up for me, a trophy, if you will. It's a sleek mock charging port with a clear casing inside, a small battery, a glowing LED display that reads Energy Restored 21. 6 kWh, courtesy of Karen. It even has a fake Tesla logo on top just for flavor, mounted in my garage, right next to the breaker panel. It lights up every time I flip the switch, like a souvenir of pettiness properly executed. And Karen, while she hasn't tried to use the charger again. In fact, she barely looks in my direction anymore. I think she's hoping if she pretends I don't exist, the neighborhood will forget the time she basically sponsored my home battery system through unsolicited donations. Her Tesla now charges on a slow plug she ran Through her window from her house, I'm not saying it looks pathetic, but if Humble Pie came with an extension cord, this would be it. The charger still sits in the same place sign, still up switch ready, and if Karen or anyone like her ever tries it again, let's just say the trap is always fully charged. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are watching from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.